Hello everyone, this is AbisMal, and today we're doing a head-to-head comparison between two Iceman Justice decks. This is Boomguy versus AbisMal in this versus battle to see which deck is the better of the two. Both decks, in this case, faced Klaw, first in Standard, and then an Expert as the appetizer. And then we dug into the main course, which was Magneto. So we did one time on Standard to warm up and get used to his encounter deck, and then 3 times on Expert, which is the real test. But every one of those battles counted in this head-to-head. Have some disclaimers first, though. Boomguy and I chatted on Marvel CDB ahead of time, and he graciously gave me the okay to use his deck for this versus competition. It's really meant to be a way to celebrate different ways people might build decks. And that's the main purpose of this, really. So get a chance for people to see, here are 2 different decks, both Justice, both Iceman. What are some choices people might make when they're building these? Note that in this head-to-head battle, going up against Klaw and Magneto, different villains could make a big difference as well, of course. And I have to admit that when I first saw Boomguy's deck, Dr. Icelove, I did experience some trepidation. So you can see his deck right over here, Dr. Icelove. First was when I saw the amazing write-up and movie references. So let me go ahead and go full screen on that so you can see what that looks like. So if you look over here, you can see he has all these references to Dr. Strangelove. This is Dr. Icelove instead. And so you can get through all of the setup here and then gradually get into the actual description of the deck down here. So please check it out. It's a great write-up, and the description is great as well. Plus, one of the things you'll end up wanting to note, actually, is that this has been play-tested quite thoroughly. So this is already shown to be an effective deck against quite a few villains. But the other part I actually found a little bit intimidating about this deck was, and we'll get into the details of this later, was the pure amount of pure ability of this deck to get rid of threat. So we'll see that when we start to look at the similarities and differences of the 2 decks. But for sure, if we're just looking at the storytelling and theme of the write-up, Boomguy is the clear winner in this case. But let's get to what really matters, which is the decks. So let's go side by side again here. So first, we are both running 8 allies. So we can see that in both decks here. The title of my deck, by the way, Love at First Bite, which is in reference to a 1979 movie, Love at First Bite, a vampire comedy of all things. So might be something some of you might want to check out. Don't know that it stands the blessed test of time. Back to the decks, though, and their similarities. So the first major thing is there's a significant amount of card draw from both of these decks. We included 3 Clear the Area in both of our decks. So Clear the Area, remove 2 threat from a scheme. If this removes the last threat on that scheme, you draw a card. In addition to that, we both had 2 copies of One Way or Another. Search the encounter deck for a side scheme, reveal that side scheme, and then draw 3 cards. So both of us included all 5 of those cards. In addition, we also both included the upgrade Skilled Investigator. So you can play under any player's control, max 1 per player. The hero response, after a side scheme is defeated, exhaust Skilled Investigator, draw 1 card. So that especially complements the ability to use One Way or Another. And I might as well mention this other similarity, the player side scheme. In his case, he has 1 player side scheme, Superpower Training, and the similarity there is I also have Superpower Training in my deck. In my case, I did lean into the card draw further with a copy of Nick Fury, right? So after Nick Fury enters play, choose 1, remove 2 threat from a scheme, but what we really care about is that second part, draw 3 cards. So that was the piece that I leaned into further with Love at Frostbite. Then the other major similarity is the significant amount of readying Iceman. So he already has some of this built into his deck, and actually some more card draw. So let's go to that. So if we look at Cryokinetic Perception, after resolve your freeze ability, exhaust this card, then draw one card. If that card has an ice trait, ready Iceman. So it adds to the card draw, and also if you end up drawing an ice traded card, which all of his personal cards, the cards for his own identity specific cards, those all have the ice trait. So anytime he draws those, he readies. And that ability here, as a reminder, is freeze, interrupt. When Iceman makes a basic attack or defense against an enemy, attach a set-aside copy of Frostbite to that enemy. So whenever he uses this ability, that's when he is able to, okay, so if we go back to cryokinetic perception, so after you resolve your freeze ability, exhaust this card, draw one card. And then again, if that card has an ice trait, ready Iceman. So how did we both lean into those readies? Well, that was through the incorporation of the support Utopia, and we had all three the same supports, by the way, in our deck. So another similarity: team building exercise, X-Jet, and Utopia. So back to Utopia. So Utopia, if each of your allies has the X-Men trait, increase your ally limit by 1. That has nothing to do with readying, but the response does. After an X-Men ally enters play, exhaust Utopia, ready an X-Men character. So the X-Men character we're going to ready is our hero, Iceman, and we both included a significant number of X-Men allies. 2 of them are included in the deck. The Snow Clones are ice traded, and they are also X-Men traded, so those count. In addition, in Boomguy's deck for Dr. Iceman, all but 2 of the rest of these are Iceman traded. So just Eros and Wiccan, those are the only 2 that are not. And in my deck, Nick Fury is the only ally that is not Iceman traded. So mine has a little bit more readying with regard to that, but Boomguy included 1 more card to help with that. So if we go down to our upgrades, that would be Justice Served. So after you thwart and remove the last threat from a scheme, discard Justice Served, you ready your hero. So that's an additional opportunity there as well. So those are really the 2 big areas that these decks are similar. So we have the readying and the card draw. And I already mentioned the supports, which the other supports are basically are resource generators. And so even if they're not, true resource generators, team building exercise allows you to play one of your traded cards that are the same trait as your hero, reducing cost by 1. So it's similar to being a resource generator. And we also included Sense of Justice, which acts as a resource generator for thwart events. And if we look at the events in the deck that are thwart events, we have 3 from Chill Out. Those are his own events that are thwart events, but we also both have 3 clear to the area, and then we'll look at differences later. But there are 4 more cards in his events and 3 more cards on top of those in my events. So we both have plenty of ability for that particular resource generator as well. And we did both include energy, genius, and strength. But now it's time to get into the differences of the decks, because that is what then made the decks play differently. So we're going to start with Boomguy's deck, and I am going to go full screen on that. So the biggest difference for Boomguy's deck was this justice thwarting, using 4 justice, using impede. So these are, we both included clear the area, but his are larger cards in terms of their abilities. So these are both 2-cost cards. In 4 Justice, for the card 4 Justice, you remove 3 threat from a scheme, 4 threat instead if you paid for this using a mental resource. And then Impede, which is also 2-cost, remove 3 threat from the main scheme. If this is the first card you've played this round, return this card to your hand. So then you could either use it again, or more likely just use it as a resource to play another card. So leaning into that means that Boomguy's deck is taking into account these uses of one way or another and making sure he has what it takes to get rid of that, and especially if you include the allies as well. So because of that, he included 2 Power of Justice to make it easier to play 4 Justice cards, the 2 Impede cards, and then the 3 allies, as well as, which one is it? Sense of Justice over here. So all of those cards are assisted by the power of justice. So that's the one big difference for his deck, just a very large ability to remove threat. So let's go back to the side-by-side and get over to AbisMal's deck. All right, so we have here Levitt Frostbite, and let's also go full screen for this one. So the first thing is AbisMal, me. I went with 3 multitasking cards in addition to the Clear the Area cards, so they're all 1 cost, right? So multitasking is 1 cost, remove 2 threat from a scheme. If you paid for this card using a mental resource, remove 2 threat from a different scheme. And I did that so that I could then emphasize using the power in all of us to support my cards, which is why for my allies, they are all, and notice all of them are basic allies. There are no justice allies in here. In addition, the power in all of us assists with getting team building exercise, the X-Jet, and Utopia into play. And then the other big aspect emphasized in my particular deck is the ability to incapacitate the villain. So in order to see that, first let's look at what's included in Iceman's deck. So first we have Frozen Solid. So if we look at Frozen Solid, it's you can use it in hero form only. You have a Forced Interrupt. When attached enemy would activate, discard Frozen Solid instead. Then attach a set-aside copy of Frostbite to that enemy. So the enemy cannot activate at all in this case. In addition, there's another card that has a similar type of effect as far as attacks are concerned, and that's Ice Wall. So Ice Wall is a 4-cost card, has a Forced Interrupt. When an identity, so in this case it's solo play, so Iceman, would take any amount of damage from an enemy attack, and I guess that would be his alter ego side too. When he would take any amount of damage from an enemy attack, place that damage here instead. Then, if there is at least 8 damage here, discard this card and attach a set-aside copy of Frostbite to the enemy that just attacked. So this is another way to essentially incapacitate the villain so that it can't really do anything, have any impact on your hero. So to add to that ability, I also included Professor X, which is included in both decks. So this is also in Boomguy's deck. But I added to that 2 copies of Upside the Head. So this is after your hero makes a basic attack and damages an enemy, confuse that enemy. If that enemy is already confused, stun it instead. So because we are readying Iceman regularly, he gets regular opportunities to use Upside the Head because he might the first time attack one of the minions. But then if he readies again, then he can go for then he could go for hitting the villain and then use Upside the Head. Or perhaps he has to do it twice because Magneto ends up with a whole bunch of, what's that called? Oh yes, the tough tokens. So he ends up with a whole bunch of those, like he gets them time and time again. So a lot of times the first attack is just to remove that tough and then get a chance to attack again and finally actually be able to do some damage, because you do have to do damage with Upside the Head to be able to use its ability. So once again, Upside the Head, after a hero makes a basic attack and damages an enemy, confuse that enemy. If the enemy is already confused, stun it instead, and I did actually accomplish that at least in one game against Magneto, so where I did actually have both on. All right, so those are the differences. Now let's check out the results. I played let's go back to showing both side by side. So what I tried to do is make it as fair as I could, and that was by playing my deck first. And the reason for that is I wanted to become thoroughly familiar with Iceman's identity-specific cards so that I could just focus on the differences of the rest of the cards that build out the deck. So I didn't have to think about those differences when I was playing Dr. Icelove, Boomguy's deck. I knew already what, after doing 5 plays of my deck, I knew those Iceman cards well. So first, I took on Expert Klaw and Standard and Expert Klaw. Probably not too surprising. Both Dr. Icelove and Love at First Bite, both decks had victories there. And then we faced Magneto. First, that was also on standard. And again, both decks defeated Magneto on standard. So then that leaves expert. So there were 3 expert plays. So my deck went first, Love It Frostbite. And the results are that I lost the first battle against him. And then I was able to have basically an endurance match on the second battle, but did end up defeating him there. And then I really dominated him in the third match. So, and I don't think that was a matter of getting better, although probably I did get better some as I was playing. But it was more one of those things, of course, hey, the card draw is everything. The heroes deck and the villains deck. And we'll see that had an impact in the other games. So those are the results. So just one loss against Magneto, and that was in expert. So that's Love It Frostbite, AbisMal's deck. So what about Dr. Icelove? What were those results? So again, I already said victory against standard, and just like in my deck, had a loss in the first battle. And then I played a second battle and unfortunately lost again, but finally won on the third battle, and it was a fairly dominant victory. Wasn't really close to any times where it was close to losing at all. Okay? So, but did pull out that victory on the third battle. So in terms of this particular versus battle, though, the winner in this case is AbisMal with Love It Frostbite. But we, like I said, we do know how luck of the draw is, and certainly in my second battle, there was at least one moment where if I had drawn the wrong card at the wrong time, I would have lost myself. Also, it'd be interesting to see how these decks might go up against, say, Red Skull or Thanos. But I did want to mention that they really did feel like different decks. It didn't. There were times that they were doing some of the same things, of course, because of all the card draw and because of incapacitating the villain. But having the cheaper costing justice cards here, having more allies that could come out and ready. It was noticeable, the extra card draw with Nick Fury and getting more allies out there to ready him more often. That seemed to do the trick with regard to have a better chance of succeeding against Magneto. But I'm imagining another, first of all, if I face Thanos, it wouldn't make sense to have Upside the Head in my deck at all, since Thanos has Stalwart. But let's say Red Skull, and that would be, I think, a nice test of the two decks, is to go up against Red Skull. And Red Skull, gets those side schemes out there constantly. And so Dr. Icelove's extra ability to be able to handle that with these high-powered for Justice cards could end up making the difference. So I had to rely on my allies quite a bit to make up the difference for mine, but they were able to do so. So that was, it didn't feel like there was a lack there, but I could imagine with having to deal with more threat that Dr. Icelove, Boomguy's deck, could very well do better. Somebody else will have to do that test, though. In this case, I'll just take my victory and run. Just kidding. Of course, thank you very much. I really appreciate Boomguy's willingness to have this head-to-head battle. That's it for today. So everybody have a great one.